My boss asked me out to dinner just to tell me they were letting me go. After I had built the whole tech department from zero, I was getting replaced by the owner's nephew. These things happen, I said with a calm smile. Nobody knew I had already figured this out weeks ago. My name's Mark, and I'm 42. For 12 years, I was basically the guy who kept the computers running at Sterling Works factory. You wouldn't know it from the company website or anything, though. I put in all the security for our computer network back when we were still using really old computers and writing down passwords on sticky notes. I took our small computer help team of 5 people and turned it into a big group of 30 that kept 3 factories running all the time, day and night. The machines in Bay City never stopped, and neither did I. I wasn't even supposed to stay there long. I took the job just to have something to do after my divorce, a way to keep busy while I figured out my life. But I was good at it. Really good. And over time, those computers and networks felt like they belonged to me. Not legally, but in every other way that mattered. The dinner was at the Grand Plate, a fancy restaurant where the company bigwigs took important clients. Not the kind of place where you usually fire someone. But Alan Carter, our main boss, always cared about how things looked. "Mark, you've been a huge help," he said, cutting his steak. "But we need fresh eyes. Someone who knows where technology is going." What he really meant was, we found someone cheaper who won't argue when the higher-ups make dumb choices. George Davies' nephew had just finished his degree at State Tech University. Alan said he was a super smart kid who knew all about changing businesses using new tech. I just nodded and took a drink of water. Who will handle teaching the new person? Alan looked relieved that I wasn't making a big deal. "You'll have 6 weeks. We'll tell everyone after the big company meeting next quarter." I signed the paper saying I wouldn't talk about it before we even got dessert. I smiled, shook his hand, and told him I understood that companies have to make business choices. Back at my desk, I saw that my main computer access had already been cut back. My name was taken off the email list for the bosses. They had made up their minds before dinner, probably weeks before. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was mad, though I was. Not because I worried about finding a new job. It was because of something I'd seen in the computer records 3 months earlier. Small tries to get into our systems without permission, coming from a computer address I figured out was from the boss's floor. Someone was poking around in parts of the system they shouldn't have known about, looking at how I set things up, my safety rules, my plans for when things went wrong. They weren't just kicking me out. They were trying to steal everything I knew first. I moved to Bay City 16 years ago because of Sarah, after we got married. I left a good security job in another city because she was going to grad school here. We were young and had big plans. I figured I'd find a job. The divorce totally caught me off guard. 7 years of building a life, and then suddenly, papers on the kitchen table. "We want different things," she said. No fights, no warning, just over. When Sterling Works hired me, I was sleeping on my brother's sofa. They needed someone to fix their broken computer network after a virus attack. I was supposed to be just for a little while, but I saw a chance. These factory guys knew machines, but not computers. Their whole business, millions of dollars in equipment, hundreds of jobs, was running on old systems, ready to fall apart at any moment. I showed Alan a plan to fix everything over 5 years. He gave me the money and let me do my work. For 3 years, I barely saw the sun. I rebuilt every network, taught the staff, made copies of everything, and set up backup plans. When the big power outage happened in the area, our factory was the only one that stayed running. The company board noticed. Alan started inviting me to meetings. My budget got 3 times bigger. I hired a team of good people, like Ben, who became my main helper, and Lisa, who could solve any problem with computer code. We weren't just the computer guys anymore. We were the reason Sterling Works could promise customers they would always meet their deadlines. George Davies, the main owner, shook my hand at the company Christmas party a few years ago. "You made us a modern company," he said. "We couldn't have grown without your systems." I thought I had found my spot, a place where I mattered. The first problem showed up last fall. A consultant I didn't know just showed up to check our computer systems. He asked simple questions about systems I built myself. When I asked who sent him, he just said, "the executive team," and changed the subject. Then I lost access to the notes from the board meetings on the shared computer drive. The note just said, "cleaning up files." In the winter, Alan started canceling our weekly meetings, always with a good excuse. At the boss's meeting at the start of the new year, I heard George talking about his nephew graduating. "He's brilliant with computers," he said. "Companies in Silicon Valley are fighting over him." I didn't think much of it. I should have. The last warning sign came when Sarah told me about a meeting. She had been invited to a meeting about future plans that I should have led. When she brought up my name, Alan quickly talked about something else. "Something felt wrong," she said, "like they were making plans that didn't include you." I just brushed it off. "Being too loyal is my weakness," my ex-wife used to say. 2 days after the dinner, I was in the computer server room at 7 p.m., long after most people had left. The quiet buzzing of the machines always made me feel calm. These rows of servers, the blinking lights, the cooling systems. I had picked every part, designed how they would back each other up. This was my space. I ran my hand along the edge of the main computer stand. 12 years of my life were hidden behind these walls. Working late. I turned around to see Nathan Blake, George's nephew, standing in the doorway. He was neat and tidy, wore a fancy watch, and looked confident. He looked like he wasn't much older than 30. "Just checking things," I said. "Need something. Getting a feel for the place." He walked in like he already owned it. "Alan mentioned you'd show me around soon." He did. Nathan looked at how the servers were set up. "Looks good. A bit old style, but strong." Old style? I had updated these systems just 8 months ago. "Your notes are very detailed," he went on. "I've been reading about how you set things up. I have some ideas for making them more modern." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Looking forward to hearing them. The words felt like dust in my mouth. After he left, I sat down at my computer and opened the logs of who accessed the systems. Nathan's login information had been made 3 weeks before my dinner with Alan. He had been given the highest level of access. He had already looked at all my notes and plans. I took out my phone and sent a text to Ben. "Can you meet tomorrow before work? Coffee at the Daily Grind. 6:30. That night, I drove to the lakefront, parking where Sarah and I used to watch the sun go down. The water was black under the winter sky. I thought about the day Alan had made me the director. "You're the backbone of this place," he'd said. "We couldn't run without you." Turns out backbones can be replaced, too. Ben was already at the coffee shop when I arrived the next morning. He had dark circles under his eyes. He knew something was wrong. "They're getting rid of me," I said right away. He nodded slowly. "I thought so. They've been asking weird questions, having me explain how your systems work." "When?" "Couple weeks now." He looked down at his coffee. "I'm sorry, man. I should have told you." I didn't blame him. Ben had kids and a house payment. "What's your plan?" he asked. I hadn't even thought about having a plan until he asked. But sitting there, watching the people rushing to work outside the window, something clicked inside me. A clear feeling I hadn't had since I found Sarah's divorce papers. "They think everything is in the notes," I said quietly. "But we both know that's not true." Ben leaned forward. "The special tools? The ways around problems?" I nodded. "The little fixes I built that aren't written down anywhere. The special way I set up monitoring, the system the customers use that nobody else really gets." "Derek, I'm not going to mess anything up," I said. "But I'm not going to just give away what's mine either." Ben looked at me for a second, then nodded. He understood. "I need copies of everything I made myself," I said. "And I need to know who I can still trust." The official announcement came during the big company meeting the next week. Alan stood at the front talking about exciting changes and new ideas. Nathan stood next to him, smiling nicely when he was supposed to. "Mark has been key to building our computer systems," Alan said, not looking at me. And we thank him for his work as he helps us move to Nathan's leadership over the next 6 weeks. People in the room started whispering. Most of the tech team looked shocked. Sarah's eyes found mine across the room. A silent question. I gave her the smallest nod. After the meeting, I asked to talk with Alan and the HR person. I pointed out that some of the systems Nathan would be taking over were built by me on my own time using my own tools. Your work contract is clear, said Diane from HR, pushing a paper across the table. Anything you made while working here belongs to the company. Not everything, I argued. The system flow connection system was built before I started at Sterling Works. I let the company use it, but I still own it. It says so right in the first agreement. Alan shifted in his seat. That was 10 years ago, Mark. The company has changed. And so has system flow. Every update, every time it was connected to something new, was built on my original code. I leaned forward. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to be paid fairly for my idea. Alan and Diane looked at each other. We'll look into it, Alan said finally. For now, please focus on helping Nathan with the changeover. I knew that look. They were just trying to buy time. The next morning, I couldn't get into the computers used for building new systems. Safety rule during changeovers, the automatic email said. Nathan called a team meeting without asking me. When I showed up anyway, he seemed annoyed but quickly hid it. Mark, good you could make it. I was just explaining some changes to how the network will be set up. I leaned against the doorframe. Interesting. Which part exactly? The main factory floor systems, he said with confidence. We're going to make the rules simpler. Those rules stop the machines from breaking down when they're working hardest, I said calmly. They were made specifically for our equipment. Nathan's smile got tighter. Modern systems don't need complicated ways around problems like that. They're not ways around problems, Sarah broke in. They're needed changes for our specific machines. Mark designed them after the failure in 2018. The room went quiet. Nathan looked unsure for a second, then, well, I appreciate the history lesson, but we're moving forward with making things simpler. He turned to the whiteboard, basically telling me I was done. Later that day, I got an email from the legal department. The company said they owned all the systems, including system flow, pointing to a rule about connected technologies becoming company property. They offered me a bonus of $5,000 for my technology. The real blow came the next day. I found out Nathan had set up one-on-one talks with each person on my team. Not to discuss the change, but full job reviews. He was figuring out who he would keep. Ben texted me later. He asked if your systems were really needed or just too hard to understand, trying to get me to say something bad. That night, I found an email from one of our suppliers in my personal account. They were confused about a new agreement Sterling Works had sent them, one I knew nothing about. I looked at the paper. Alan had signed a deal giving all my special connections for suppliers to another company, a startup owned by Nathan's old classmate. They weren't just pushing me out. They were taking apart everything I'd built and selling it. When I tried to get into the backup computers to get my original code, I found my access was completely shut off. Game on. I needed something to fight with, and I needed it fast. Sterling Works hadn't just been careless. They had planned this. The timeline was clear now. Nathan had been brought in months ago, studying my systems, getting ready to take my place while taking everything I knew. That night, I called Mike Williams, a computer safety expert I'd worked with years ago. We met at a diner off the main road, the kind of place bosses like Alan would never go. Legally, you're in a tough spot, Mike said after I told him everything. But something doesn't add up. Why push you out now? The company is doing well. That's what I can't figure out, I admitted. Let me poke around, he offered. Just looking for information, nothing that will cause problems. 2 days later, Mike called me at 11 p.m., you need to see this. He had found papers showing Sterling Works was getting ready to be bought out. Global Systems Group, a big manufacturing company from another state, was close to buying them. The deal depended on Sterling Works showing they had modern computer systems and someone new in charge of tech. They're cleaning up the place to make the sale look better, Mike explained. And your systems are a big part of why they're worth so much. The paperwork mentions the special factory management system. My system flow. There's more, Mike continued. George Davies sold most of his shares last quarter. The sale would mostly help Alan and the other bosses. They get big bonuses and jobs at Global Systems Group. What really hurt wasn't the sale. It was finding emails showing Alan and George had talked about replacing me over 6 months ago. While I was working all night to fix a major security problem, they were interviewing Nathan. I drove to the old industrial area where I had first drawn out the system flow plans years ago when it was just an idea. I sat in my car until the sun came up, watching the sky turn gray over empty buildings. When I got home, I found an old external hard drive in my closet, plugged it in, and found what I was looking for. The original system flow code, from before Sterling Works, the papers showing I had started working on it 8 months before I joined the company. I also found the emails. Alan specifically asking me to connect system flow with Sterling Works systems. His note saying it was my special tool. His promise that we would make the ownership official once things were calmer. I had trusted him. My fault. The next day, Nathan called me into a meeting with Alan and Diane from HR. We're speeding up the change, Alan said right away. Your last day will be next Friday. 2 weeks instead of 6, I noted. Any particular reason? Nathan has shown he's very capable, Diane said smoothly. And honestly, Mark, your attitude hasn't been helpful for a smooth handover. I nodded slowly. I see. We'll need you to finish all the notes and training by Wednesday, Nathan added. Of course, I replied, my voice steady. And the ownership of System Flow? Have you had time to look at the first agreements? Alan's face got hard. Our legal team says all connected systems belong to the company. The money package for leaving is good, Mark. I suggest you take it. I stood up. I'll have my lawyer look at everything. Don't make this difficult, Alan warned. It won't change the end result. As I walked out, I texted Ben. Plan B tonight. 7 hours later, Ben gave me a small memory stick in the parking lot of a grocery store. Everything you asked for, he said quietly. Original code files, records of when things were put in place, main access keys. I thanked him, then asked, Why are you helping me? He looked me in the eye. Because they think they can just replace all of us. I spent the weekend carefully putting together all the papers. The original system flow code, the emails with Alan, the agreements about using the software, the dates proving I had built the main technology before Sterling Works. Monday morning, I got there early, found Sarah already at her desk looking tired. You heard they're making it faster, she asked. I nodded. How's the team feeling? Not good. Nathan made everyone work emergency planning sessions all weekend. He tried to figure out how your monitoring system works. She lowered her voice. It didn't go well. 3 warnings from the factory floor were missed. Anyone hurt? No, but they had to shut down one line for 4 hours. Cost about $40,000 in lost work. I kept my face blank. Sorry to hear that. Mark, she hesitated. I think I'm next. Nathan's been asking if my job is even necessary. I had a feeling that was coming. Sarah knew too much about how things really operated. Do you trust me? I asked quietly. She didn't think for a second. Completely. I slid a sealed envelope across her desk. If anything happens this week, anything strange, open this. It explains everything. That afternoon, I met with 3 different lawyers who deal with inventions and ideas. I paid extra to quickly file temporary patents on the important parts of system flow. Not the whole system, just the key parts that made it work with the factory machines. On Tuesday, I finished all the notes Nathan needed for the changeover, went to his planning meeting, answered questions nicely. I was the perfect employee. Meanwhile, Mike was helping me set up a secure computer server somewhere else. By midnight, I had copied all my original code there and made a version of System Flow that could run on its own, separate from Sterling Works computers. Wednesday morning, I found an email from Global Systems Group in my personal account. It was an invitation to talk about working together at their local office. They had heard I was leaving Sterling Works and were interested in my skills. Someone was covering their bases. I sent the email to my lawyer, then called Global Systems Group's head of operations. I suggested we meet after I officially left Sterling Works. He agreed right away. That night, I did the most important part of my plan. Using the computer access Ben had saved for me, I updated 3 key parts of system flow. I added a check that would see if the code had been changed by anyone who wasn't supposed to. I also changed the software license to stop working in exactly 8 days, the day after my last day. I made a clear, legal way for things to change. The system would keep working if a proper agreement was made. Nothing to break things, nothing bad, just protecting what was mine. On Thursday, Nathan called me into his office. "Some of the team say you've been acting odd," he said. "Anything I should know?" "Just focused on finishing everything up," I replied. He watched me, looking suspicious. "We're changing all the system passwords and access details tomorrow after you leave. It's normal procedure." "Makes sense," I said, "though it won't affect how system flow actually works." "Meaning?" "Just that the system is built to keep running no matter what the main admin changes are. That's why it's so good." I could tell he was trying to figure out if I was threatening him or just explaining something. He guessed wrong. "I think we're fine here." He dismissed me. "Legal will meet with you tomorrow for the final papers." As I walked out, Alan passed me in the hallway. He barely nodded. 12 years gone in that small movement. By midnight, everything was ready. I sent one last email to my private server. Check sequence Alpha 7 finished. The countdown had started. Friday morning, I gave back my work badge, signed the papers to leave, and said no to the lunch Nathan had planned to celebrate my departure, which Alan seemed visibly happy about. As I walked to my car, Ben called. "It's done," he said. "Nathan just changed all the main admin passwords. They're checking the whole system this afternoon." "Thanks for letting me know," I said, keeping my voice even. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we wait." I spent the weekend at home, didn't answer calls from numbers I didn't know, and slept better than I had in months. Monday morning at 9:17 a.m., exactly when the factory floor started working hardest, every computer screen running system flow across Sterling Works' 3 factories showed the same message. "License expired. Please contact the developer to get a new one." By 9:20, the first production line stopped. By 9:45, all 3 factories were shut down. At 10:30, Alan called me himself. "What in the world did you do?" He tried to sound angry, but I could hear the panic. "I didn't do anything," I replied calmly. "The software license ran out. As the creator and owner of System Flow, I'm happy to talk about getting a new license." "This is sabotage," he yelled. "It's just managing the license," I corrected him. "Look at the first agreement from 12 years ago. Rule 7 clearly says Sterling Works was allowed to use the technology, not buy it." Silence on the phone line. "I've sent a proper licensing agreement to your legal department," I went on. "The terms are simple. Agree that I own it, pay me fairly to keep using it, and sign a paper saying you won't talk about how I left." "That's extortion." "That's business," I replied. "These things happen." By 3 p.m., their lawyers had looked at all my documents. By 5 p.m., the agreement was signed. 3 days later, I sat across from Global Systems Group's Vice President of Operations in their downtown office. He slid a contract across the table. "We're still buying Sterling Works," he said. "But we want you to be the main person in charge of putting the computer systems together, as a consultant, not an employee." The pay was twice what Sterling Works had given me. I would be in charge of my own hours and where I worked. "What about Nathan?" I asked. The VP looked a little annoyed. "Mr. Blake will be moving on to other jobs." I signed the contract that afternoon. 2 weeks later, Ben called to tell me Nathan had quietly been let go from his job. The official story was he found other chances. The real reason was that 3 big customers had threatened to leave after the systems kept breaking down. Alan stayed on as the main boss through the sale, but his job at Global Systems Group was mostly just a title. No real power, no team, just a fancy name and an office far away from where decisions were made. I didn't feel as happy about it as I expected, just a quiet feeling that I had done what I needed to. The next month, I used my first paycheck from consulting to put down money on a small cabin near the lake. Nothing fancy, just a quiet spot with a deck looking out over the water, a place where I could watch the sun go down and come back up again. Sarah joined my consulting team 3 months later. Then Ben. Eventually, half of my old department was working with me, not for me. We were partners in a business that was growing. I ran into Alan at a restaurant downtown about a year after everything happened. He started to walk away, then stopped. Came over to my table. "You won," he said simply. I looked at him, really looked. The tiredness around his eyes, his slightly wrinkled suit. He had aged. "It wasn't about winning," I replied, and I meant it. "It was about value, knowing what you're worth." He nodded once, then walked away. I sat there for a long time, watching the city lights turn on across the river, thinking about systems, the ones we build, the ones we break, and the ones that last longer than all of us.